I'll speak a little bit just about my own spiritual life, because Stuart has called this discussion about spirituality in the modern world. And I found that, in fact, spirituality is not modern. It's very old, and it's still growing and developing always in this modern world. A little bit like what Ken Wilber teaches about the spirit is continually evolving. And so even as we sit here, the spirit is still becoming form, and it only becomes form through us. And so for me, my formation began as a Catholic, actually. I came from a Catholic English background, and I had a very devotional grandmother who had sort of statues in her room, and she lived with us, and lots of devotion and prayer and holy water when you were sick and all those sort of things. And my mother was very, very liberal Catholic, and there was a lot of discussion in the house around Vatican II and ad hoc and conscience over dogma, and so it was very exciting, and we were talking about God a lot when I was growing up. And I never really ever went through a sort of adolescence of faith where I moved away radically, but I did get a little dulled by organized religion, and my biggest adventure began when I became quite sick. And usually I found that that's where God or the Spirit breaks through, is sometimes in something that's perceived to be a tragedy or a loss or grief, or things not turning out the way that you expected or desired, even though you thought you did the right thing. And for me, I became sick with a thyroid disease, which was very, very esoteric and hard to find out actually what it was. I was feeling more depressed, and then I really just got worse and worse and worse, to the point where I felt that I couldn't do anything of my own will, and I was pretty good at that. So I was lying on the bed after an operation saying, well, I can't do anything now anymore. And that's exactly when God says, good, I've got you where I exactly wanted you. You can't do anything by yourself anymore. So I turned to the healing process, and the healing process, I went to an ashram. I found myself, through prayer, in a completely different culture of organized religion. And as soon as I stepped into this ashram, which was not the other side of the world, I luckily found it, or it was found about 2 hours north of Toronto, where I live. And I took my shoes off, and I heard all this chanting, and I thought, why do I feel I've come home? And I did. And I think it was because I was in an environment with people who loved God. They were just there because they loved God. And somehow or other, I felt I'd come home. And from that place, I slowly emerged back to a much closer sort of mystical relationship with Christ through Hindu practice. Quite extraordinary, but that's what happened. And the Hindus are so wonderful because they don't try and convert you to Hinduism. They always try and help you become more of who you are and who your idea of God or your relationship with your particular master or guru is. So 2 Indian swamis helped me become closer to Christ just through hanging around with them. And from there, I felt like I really wanted to go into this ashram and live in this ashram forever because I felt so good there. But I found out the spiritual life isn't about feeling actually good there. You know, the New Agers always say, oh, you know, it's about feeling good, dancing in the light. And of course, as soon as you start dancing in the light, you come crashing down, don't you? And so I wanted to dance in the light of this ashram with all the miracles that were going on. And I was pondering this, and I was packing up my car, and I didn't want to go back. And Munaji, this Swami, said, make your home your ashram. You don't belong here. Make your home your ashram. And so I came back to my original home, and I changed the environment. I didn't sort of move the furniture around or anything. I just changed my attitude to home, that this was my sacred space. And therefore, and this was a place where God was going to dwell with me. And I started doing it was sort of like going to a cave in the Himalayas in a sense. But I just stayed at home and I sort of slowly let the world just disappear and started experiencing the Eastern teachings, the here and now. I mean, one of the things I did was I used to come out of the door in the morning and think about my office, where I was going to go, and already being in the office, you know, I was already there, and so I was on automatic pilot in my car. And then I would come out of my door another morning and be in the moment, and then a dog would come and sniff my leg, and someone would say good morning, and I smelt something in the air. So I started doing these sort of things, trying to see how the teachings actually worked in my life from the East. And one of the ones I loved was the Lao Tzu Tao Te Ching, and there was a small paragraph in there that said, you don't have to go looking in the world for what you need. Just be still, and the stiller you are, the more the world can come to you. And I really experienced that in my house. I was doing more and more still practice, and I didn't have to go out and, I used to, you know, sell for a living or promote or anything. I just had to be very still, and I noticed what was busy and what kept me from that stillness. And after about 2 years of practicing up to 3 or 4 hours of meditation a day, still carrying on working in between, I knew that I had to choose my adult path. And it wasn't that I was going to do yoga or it was that what was the sacramental way that I had to serve God now. And I think as adults we have only a few choices. One is to go it alone, sit in a cave and become a renunciate. Tough one, but some people have that calling. The other was to be in a community, so a religious community, I suppose. Would that be an ashram? Would it be a Catholic convent? Oh dear, you know. And then the last one was with one other. And that's how you serve God. And I'd had a number of relationships, and this was a time when I was celibate, and I was contemplating the cave, actually, because I couldn't get the community thing sorted out. And then I thought, no, but you know what? The cave might be easier for me than doing it with the other, because the other's messier, in a way. And so I sort of knew that perhaps it was marriage, that was the sacramental way that I was to serve God. So I prepared myself for that. The tougher, not the easier road, the one that I felt called. And so I prepared myself inwardly to meet my complementary other, my twin soul. And I followed the instructions of the Tao Te Ching, which was, you don't go out looking, you become stiller, and he will come or she will come to you. And what was extraordinary about God is that, of course, if we didn't have God breaking through in our lives, then why would we be carrying on searching, continually searching for more of God? So for me, one of the greatest miracles was a phone call after those 2 years of a man saying, do you want to come to this evening for spiritually inclined singles? And I thought, oh, it sounds like a dreadful idea. And I said no. But I'd done enough psychotherapy and gestalt and body work to know that when this movement was coming up almost from my vagina all the way up my chakras saying, you're going, that there was nothing my head could tell me, that I had to answer this. So I said no about 4 times, and then I said yes, and so he said, what is it, yes or no? And when I arrived at John's apartment, because John was hosting the evening, although he didn't really want to do it either, so that already was a sign. And he opened the door. On the wall of his hallway was an image of a little fountain, and that fountain was in the middle of a square of an Italian village where I'd had my previous relationship for 7 years. And I'd had a house on the other side of the world, and I was in Toronto, and I said, that's Asolo. And John said, that's where my family come from. So it was the coming together of all the parts of myself in that moment through prayer, from actually perceived to be doing nothing. But in fact, God showed me that I'd done everything, that this was the next stage for me. So marriage happened. John and I got married. And all the other things of having the house in Italy and all the things that emerged out of that with the work came from being depressed and sick. And so from that point, the learning that I found in the complementary other was that my feminine and my masculine interior needed to be in balance for me to meet John, who had been working, of course, on his interior for about 2 years as well. So this coming together with the divine and with the divine in the other requires us to be in interior balance. And sometimes we know that because we feel we've got too much action and we need to be stiller, and sometimes we can't be too still, we have to be a little bit in the reach towards the other. But we need to always start with the interior and move out like the tree has the sap and the branches then can sway in the wind, and you're rooted, so that if a big thunderstorm comes along or a great wind, you don't snap and get blown away. And I would say that probably is how I define the spiritual life, that we have to root ourselves in our relationship with the divine, and then our relationships with each other dance. And John and I often, when we say to each other, which we do very frequently, I love you, but we always say we love Christ or God more. So that loving God more always gives you so much more to give to the other. It doesn't mean you're going to get less.